Don't let your videos hold you back from 1,000,000 subs. This is exactly what creators with 1,000,000 plus subs are setting up their videos to look like. Because not only does it look professional, it builds trust, it adds credibility. Most importantly, it brings in the bigger paychecks. Today, we're going to cover how they're doing it, and I want you to note 3 things. First, how they're framing it. Second, their lighting setup. And third, what goes on in the background. Let's begin. Now, I'll start first with Abdaal, who I've been watching over the last few years a lot because he's around my age. He's been doing it really well as a creator on YouTube, and he's grown this brand to be over 6 figures. Then he breaks it out in some transparent videos that he does that tells you the different income streams that he has. And one of them as well is Skillshare, which I also am big on. So it's cool to be like in a Slack channel with Ali Abdaal. It's like, all right, I made it. But anyways, this is his video, and from his video we can see a couple interesting things, right? Beautifully put together, fun background. There's a lot of blue light that kind of highlights things. Now, personally, I'm not too sure about the blue lights, but I guess he's symbolizing that he's more of a tech-forward person because I think it is kind of a bit contrasty compared to everything else in the video. So with his video, a couple other things to note. The background behind him is probably about 15 feet, maybe 10 to 15 feet, and the conversion to that would be like maybe 2 to 4 meters or something like that, 2 to 4 meters. And the thing to note with that is that if your background is way too far, you might also use a green screen. And if your background is way too close, it's going to look bad on your video. It's like as if you don't have a good camera because you might as well shoot it on an iPhone. Same with as if you have the far background. So both of those are not going to look good on video because with those situations, if you have a green screen, it just works so much better because with a green screen, you can literally change your background to be anything in the world. And with AI these days, you could have the most amazing backgrounds with a green screen. So if you want to use something natural, like what he's using here and what I'm using, I actually prefer the natural background because it just shows the authenticity of the place and all that, and people could usually tell when it's green screened. But there are some creators that use the green screen effect really well, and we'll cover one of them, one of my favorites, in one of the next chapters in this video. So anyways, with Ali Abdaal, we can see again that he has some greenery. He puts the light in front of him, and there's a light in back of him. When I brought up the greenery, it's because I think it highlights the video and it highlights the place. I'm actually going to go and buy some greenery myself as well because I think that's going to make my setup here look a lot better if I have some greenery. And it's basic interior design. If you live in a place and you want it to be cozy and you want it to have this like vibe to it, inviting like vibe to it, add some greenery to it. It's a big difference. And he also has the guitar, a couple guitars, and the books. Now, that is a stylistic choice. He decides to put that there to symbolize who he is, what he represents, and although his brand is more of a tech-facing, creator-facing with the productivity stuff, which is what he built his channel on, I don't see too much the guitar connection, but I think it's more of a fun element to add to show that, hey, I'm not just a professional doctor and I'm not just like somebody that's always about corporate. I do things, you know? So potentially for me, if I have a surfboard or something here, or my suitcase, the suitcase is a nice addition that shows like, hey, maybe I'm well-traveled or something. And also, a thing to note as well is that even though the background does look pretty far, right behind him, there are walls up close to him, and it's also a triangular shape, which if you watched my other video, I mentioned that for visually appealing setups, having this triangular shape is a key element that is sought after when you're doing photography. So when you're doing video, having this same element be incorporated is going to make your shots so much better. And you can see here he does the quick zoom in to gather a bit more attention. I've done that on some of my videos as well. It's a YouTubing editing technique. We'll also highlight a couple things in front of him as well. So as you can see, in front of him there is the pens, maybe right up here or something. And the pen is also a photography technique. If you consider this whole shot, there is the foreground, which would include the pen and would include bits of the table. And you could even argue that he is in the foreground as well. And then there's a bit of a mid-ground where it's not completely up close, and it's more of like the walls to the side, or the first guitar before you see the other guitar that's directly behind him. And then there's the background, like way in the back there is the window, the guitar, the greenery. And we didn't talk too much about the light, but there is one light that I know for sure is right in front of him, direct and up to the left of him, shining down on top. And he could potentially have some other lights on the side, key lights that are highlighting different parts of him. And then there's the other lights that are just in the background, the blue lights. And one thing to note as well is that when you're doing this, you need some really powerful lights, because he's essentially competing with natural light in the background. And if your light is not more powerful than the natural light, then it's going to look dark. So for example, I want to shoot and show this background that I have. Like outside, this view is amazing. I have a bit of an ocean view as well. But I don't have powerful lights enough to be able to shoot this way, to have that as my background, because I'm competing with the sun, and that is hard. So if you are potentially, it's like lined up perfectly, it's a cloudy day, you have really powerful lights, then you could do some effect like that. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Nathaniel Drew. Now, I've been watching Nathaniel Drew since his early days, and Nathaniel is a cinematographer. Simply put, a cinematographer. And his way of putting videos together has many different shots, and he's not always just in one scenario, one place, but I wanted to highlight how he does his shot. And it's actually pretty achievable and doable for just about anyone that wants to be in front of the camera and make it look really good. So, a couple things to notice here. First off, beautiful, amazing lighting. I'm guessing he is actually sitting right in front of a window. Because he changes his shots a lot, it's probably pretty difficult to set up a light every single time, and it's also cumbersome. So personally, I wouldn't want to do that, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to do that as well. And he also has a lot of nature shots outside, and you probably don't have time to set up lights there or find the electrical stuff to plug it all in to have that light available. So you make the most of what you have. And for him, he's sitting in front of a window here, and I'm guessing on the floor because the chair looks like it's above his shoulder level or at his shoulder level, and there's some other stuff that is pretty symbolic that he's sitting on the floor. And the light right in front of him, we also have the elements of foreground, middle ground, and background, which is him in the foreground, and then the middle ground is where there's that bag on the floor, or whatever decor he has on the floor. I'm not sure what that is. And then the bookshelf, and then finally in the back is the rest of his house. All of this is also composed very well. You can see that he has incorporated the rule of thirds, because on the left side of the shoulder, the left side that we're seeing in here, which is his right shoulder, it marks the entrance of the door and also the corner of the room. And then on the right shoulder, the one that we see, and on his left shoulder, it marks the other side of the room. And it's kind of closed off or sectioned off by the edge of this cabinet. So both of these sections off a third. And as you look at this, he is in the center third. So he's incorporating the whole rule of thirds into this. And this is just so well done and well put together. I like how he does this stuff a lot, and I know he puts a lot of considerations into his shot, because if you watch his other videos, he does a lot of cinematography and well put together, like well thought out shots, as well as some B-roll stuff too. So, and as the narrative, or as the meta of being a creator these days, I've been noticing a lot of the rise of cinematics in the video landscape. So back then, it's like, okay, you just have random talking head video. But these days on TikTok especially, where if you want to see what's the most up and coming, TikTok is the place to go because that's where Gen Z lives, and that's where the most creative millennials live, and that's where the new trends are starting. And you're seeing this emergence of people doing cinematic shots and very beautifully thought out shots. So he is a natural, and if you want some inspiration, Nathaniel Drew does a good job at doing cinematics and framing his shots. So if you just watch some of his videos, get a lot of ideas, you could definitely have some good inspiration here. All right, so the next one is Coffeezilla. Like I mentioned, we were going to talk about somebody with a green screen in the back, and Coffeezilla does have exactly that. And if you look at it, it's very interesting because it's not quite the normal green screen. It's actually animated and beautifully animated. And I'm guessing he has a design team, or he has somebody that he's hired out to create this living, moving feeling to his green screen effect. So let's go back to the green screen. And if we look at it here, let's start off by talking about the lighting. He has, for sure, one lighting, which is the one on the right side of his face, lighting him up from the top down, slightly above his face. And then on the other side, there is this bluish, tintish dark light, which has a bit of a homage to the detectives of old American movies and novels. Like think Spider-Man, those years, like early Spider-Man years, and I would say maybe 1950s America, where detectives and investigative reporters and stuff have this look to them, and they're like this mysterious person sitting in their Brooklyn loft with the brick walls, and they're just sitting there in the dark, smoking, thinking about the case that they're trying to solve. And it's always in this dark, macabre light. So this is the look that he's going for, or that he's hinting at. But if you know, you know. And so the rest of it, the green screen in the back is actually, let's do this again. This is actually, he has two angles to that green screen. So one angle, it has the spinning, I forgot what those things are called, but the spinning fan, ceiling fan, and then the light here. And it's actually so well thought out because the guitar and the background right there, it has that blue light. So it makes you think that that is actually real because he has the blue light on his face as well. Now, let's go back to the other side. And you can see that these are actually two different scenes, right? Because there is the spacing of where that ceiling fan would be is different. So these, to me, show that they're two different videos that are put together. And it does have a bit of continuation where you can see that it is the same screen and that background, and the ceiling has that similar pipes coming out of it. But if you look around, there are slight discrepancies. Like this one doesn't seem to have the pipe, unless it does and I'm missing it. But there are some slight discrepancies that don't particularly show up. So I'm guessing this is two different animated scenes. Now, of course, he could have this beautifully done thing in a 3D like Blender thing. I'm not a 3D visual artist myself, so I'm not extremely well educated in that space, but he could possibly have a 3D element that is just playing video constantly, and then you can shift it around as you are video recording. So as you're recording, there's a green screen behind you. You're playing that background video, which is one whole cohesive video, and it's 3D, it's animated, it's moving. You can move that scene around because as you're shooting, we are limited to what our resolution is. I'm shooting this in 4K, but you can have that 3D rendered screen in like 12K or something. Depends how big you render that scene out to be. So This is Coffeezilla. I really like his stuff. He does a lot of this 3D animation type thing. Like at the end, he does it a lot too. And this is where he shows the people that support him. And he does a lot of this kind of dystopian future, but also retro throwback thing that I really like. I love the style that he has here. But yes, this is a beautiful example of using a green screen and how he does his shots. If you want to use a green screen, the potential is there for it to be completely beautiful. Now, the next creator we're going to look at is Iman Gadzhi. Iman, I've been watching over the last few years from the days that he started his SMMA videos, courses, and I like the motivation that he has in his videos. So this setup is a pretty simple setup, and I think if anyone wants to copy a setup and doesn't want to do too much work, take note of what he's doing here. So this setup, again, light on the top, shining down, a bit warm of a light. He probably also has some other key lights that are shining on him to bring out his features. You can see one right here on the left side of his face because the main light, the biggest one, is on the top already. And then there's the other one that's highlighting, bringing his face out a bit, because if he doesn't have that other light shining in, it's going to look really dark. And depending on the mood that you're creating on the video, sometimes it calls for it, sometimes it doesn't. But for this one, I'm sure he wanted something that shows his complete face. And with this background as well, a bit of a hint of greenery in the back, and then there's the one light on top of the shelf with the lamp. And I think there's a YouTube sign that, or no, I guess not. I guess it's an album. I wonder what album that is. But for that spot, you could have like your YouTube 100K plus subs plaque thing on display. That would be a good credibility builder, and it also shows that, hey, like this is the community that I'm in. I'm a YouTube creator. And the light in the back is kind of just an element to light up and show that the scene is exciting. It's the same as what we saw with Ali Abdaal, and it's the same with what we just saw with Coffeezilla as well. There's some elements in the back that kind of just adds life to the scene. And the other thing to note as well is that he has the corner of the room right here. It's not a full corner like what we saw with Ali Abdaal's, but it's still a corner nonetheless. Now, there's also another thing that he implements is that there's another camera. So, first shot is direct, and then the other camera is on the side. Now, the beauty of the other camera is if you are talking and you mumble, for example, then you can just cut to the other camera, and then it'll look really smooth. For example, like this, what we're shooting here is complete, non-stop, no cuts, right? But if we were to stumble or have a dead scene where I'm not talking or anything, having that other camera and then cutting in from that other camera could cut the space and it'll look seamless. So this is Iman Gadzhi's shots, and he also has some good style on him too, like how he dressed himself up, what he's wearing, the glasses he's wearing. It all fits together perfectly. So this is what I would recommend if you were getting into shooting and recording yourself. This is an easy setup to do. Light on top in front, a other light to highlight your other features, and then a background object that kind of lights up a little bit and is not totally in your face, but brings the scene to life. Now also to note, the background is not extremely close and it's not extremely far. It's probably like what I have in my back right now. So maybe 4 to 5 feet, and in that way there's some separation between the foreground and the background. Now in this case, he doesn't have a extreme background, so I would say this is a middle ground shot, but that's fine. You don't need that necessarily. You could even argue that like the far back side right here, because he's at a slanted angle, that is the background and that the middle ground is the plant section. But nonetheless, you don't have to get that technical on framing your shot. I think it doesn't make that big of a difference, but it's good to keep in mind as you're making your shots because it does look good. Now, of course, this is also a rule of thirds center framed, but it's not highly emphasized like some of the other examples were. All right, moving on, we have Daily Stoic, which is Ryan Holiday. Now, I've been watching Ryan Holiday's creations. Well, not watching, but like I've been reading his books, consuming his content, or consuming his things that he's put out over the last 10 years at least, because I remember reading his book when I was in college. And his stuff is really high quality. Over the last few years, he started getting into the video space, and I know he puts effort into his videos, so this is a good example to look at. Now, to start off with, he set up this beautiful book room to highlight his background, which is a lot of thought, and it's also on brand with him too because he's the book guy. And when you look at this shot, there's two cameras going on. One first directly in front of him, and then there's the other shot, which is this shot that just cut out, which is wider, further back, and it shows kind of the whole thing of what's going on. And also, if you look in, there's a bit of a Right Thing Right Now book that's highlighted. He also has a philosopher right here. Not sure who that is. Could be Socrates or something like that. And then there's the lights on the left of him, which could make for a good background if he's doing a podcast. So you have two speakers on both sides, that LED light thing in the center. That will look good. And then let's talk about the lighting. So the lighting that he's using is a lighting that is up and above on his right side. And then you can see from this shot too, it's actually super bright on this one, that it is definitely up and above on the right side because his face is turning right. If his face was turning left, then it would look different. So with this shot, there's also actually another light in the back right here that one highlights his book and also highlights that background. And I think the reason why he incorporated that is to show that this is a corner of a room. Like we were talking about before, having those triangular elements, the corners, is very helpful to making the scene look good. Now, there's also a bit of a rule of thirds here, a bit harder to see, but the way that this one is framed out is if you're looking and putting horizontal lines on this video, then he is on the middle 2/3. Now, if you have vertical lines, that rule doesn't apply, but the thing about photography, videography is that you can play around with the rules. And the rule of third is essentially just to show you a guideline for you to frame, and then you can have beautiful or aesthetically looking shots based on those guidelines. So with that, he goes into some B-roll, he keeps talking, and then also with this shot, it's super obvious that you can see that on the left side it's dark and on the right side of him it's bright, so there's definitely the light on the right side. And with that, these are the examples that we have. There's a lot of free resources for you to check out in the description below. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, and I'll see you soon. Also, it's the end of the video.